Hey everybody, welcome back to Coach All Writes. Today's video is for rising seniors. We're going to talk about how to improve your resume. Now, you might be wondering, why do I, as a rising senior, need a resume? And honestly, there are a few different reasons why it might be beneficial to you to have a strong resume as you go into the fall of your senior year. The first is you might be filling out some college applications, especially the Common App or maybe the UC app. There are others as well that have an activities section where you get to list your top, usually it's 10 activities and describe your involvement in those activities. And so if you have a resume, oftentimes you can take that information from your resume and put it into your activities section. You might need to adjust it a little bit, maybe put it in a different order or possibly rephrase things because you might have more space to go into more detail. But it can be really helpful to remember what you've done throughout your high school career if you have a resume. And so, as I've worked with students helping them with their college applications, it has absolutely helped them as they were doing the activities section on the Common App or other similar applications if they had a resume to go off of first. Also, you are probably going to be asking teachers for a strong letter of recommendation. You might also need a letter from your guidance counselors as well. As someone who has written countless letters of recommendation, I can tell you from a teacher's point of view, it really does help us if you give us some sort of resume or brag sheet. Because even though we know you from class, oftentimes students have other accomplishments that they want us to emphasize in addition to what type of student they are in the classroom. And when writing a letter of recommendation, it really helps us teachers if we can be as specific as possible to really emphasize how wonderful you are. And so it streamlines the process for us if we have a resume to go off of. You'll also likely need this resume as you're applying for scholarships, internships, and other jobs or programs. Now, it's possible that you might need to alter that resume, especially if you're using it for a job. But I have seen instances where students have used the same resume that they were using for a college application for a scholarship. Some scholarships actually request one. Also, having a strong resume helps you stand out in the college application process. You can even bring your resume with you as you go to college visits or interviews. So then the question becomes, what should go on a resume? So there's sort of some general categories that we look at. First of all, we look at your academic honors. This could be honor roll, it could be an AP scholar. We look at your extracurriculars. This could be stuff that you do in school, like clubs or school sports. It could be theater, ROTC. It can also be out of school extracurricular activities. So you might play for an AAU team or a travel team, or you might do rodeo or 4-H or something like that. We look at leadership and service. So this could be officer roles in a school club. It could also be volunteer hours, which could be affiliated with your school, or it could be something separate. And then there's work experience. So this could be a part-time job. It could be an internship that you've had. Some students might work for a family business, or maybe you do tutoring on the side, or babysitting, or maybe you do car detailing. Any of those count as well. And then some students might have some special skills. So this could be being fluent in a second language or third. It could be certain certifications that you have. It could also be familiarity with different types of software and things like that. Now, one worry that students sometimes have is, what if I don't have enough on my resume? It's important to be authentic to you, and it's also important to realize that they look for quality over quantity in a lot of cases. So if you have activities that you've done for a long time, meaning that you've done those activities for several years throughout high school, or activities that are a large time commitment, for instance, a part-time job or being on a varsity team, something like that, it's understandable that you might have fewer activities because of the commitment you have to your major activities. So how should you organize your resume? There are templates online. Those can be really helpful. You want to remember that it needs to be clean and easy to read. You're going to put your name and contact info at the top. If you do put an email address, remember to put a personal email address and not your school email address. A lot of schools block emails from outside places anyway that are beyond your school organization, so people wouldn't actually be able to email you at your school email address. Also, once you graduate, that email typically stops working. So make sure that you have a professional sounding personal email address. You'll put your education, so you'll put which school you went to. If you've gone to multiple high schools, you'll put the most current one at the top, but you would list both schools. You can put your GPA and your class rank if it's strong. If you don't know that information or you feel like it might not help your application, it might not be as competitive, it's okay to leave that off because colleges will see that on your transcript and sometimes counselors address that. They're part of the application that they help with as well. Then you can put your activities. Remember, these can be in school or out of school. I tend to encourage students to separate their work experience and their volunteer experience and put those as separate categories. Also, honors and awards. Sometimes that might overlap with your activities, like you might have gotten all state or all academic or something for a particular sport. And so sometimes it's not as clear cut as to where things go. I think the key is to be consistent and make sure that it's logical. Now, some students have skills or interests that they put on there, like maybe you're self-taught at guitar, or maybe you really like to edit videos or things like that. Maybe you like to crochet and you have your own little startup business. I had a student a few years ago who really liked photography, and she actually started a photography business in high school. And now that she's in college, that photography business is thriving. Photography was a skill or an interest that was worth putting on her application. You don't have to add those extra things, but sometimes it can be a way to show college admissions counselors what you like to do outside of the classroom. So it can show a little bit of personality. In general, a resume is usually one page. If you truly need to go beyond that, that's okay. Sometimes students might need to tweak the font size and things like that. Now let's talk about how to actually improve the resume itself, because this is where sometimes students have a missed opportunity where they could shine and they don't. And it usually comes down to their verbs and the lack of specifics. So for example, let's say that you worked at a summer camp. If you just write worked at a summer camp on your resume, that's not very specific. It doesn't really help the person reading your resume to understand what you actually did. So let's add some specifics. You could say something like led daily activities for 25 plus campers, ensuring safety and engagement. That gives us a much better understanding of what you did as a camp counselor. So as you are looking at your activities, really focus on three things: numbers, outcomes, and leadership. So numbers, ask yourself how many or how often. For outcomes, what happened because of your work? And then leadership. Did you have a leadership role? Did you mentor? Did you organize? You don't necessarily need an official title to be a leader, so keep that in mind. So here are a couple quick examples. Instead of saying volunteered at a food bank, you could say packed and distributed 500 plus food boxes monthly as part of community relief team serving low income families. One thing to keep in mind is that on a resume and sometimes in your Common App as well, as you're listing your activities, you might need it to be more of a bullet point format. Another example would be instead of saying played soccer, you could say 4-year varsity soccer player, team captain senior year, led team to regional semifinals. You might also even include how many hours a week you practice during the year. I know sometimes off season versus in season is different, but something like a varsity sport or ROTC or a job, those are going to be a large time commitment. So with this one here where we revised played soccer, you can see that leadership emphasis as well. Now let's talk about what to avoid. I already mentioned that you want to avoid paragraphs because those are harder to read. Bullet points are much better. You also want to avoid first person pronouns like saying I helped. Take out the I because it's implied that it's you, it's your resume. You also want to avoid those generic phrases that don't have strong verbs. So things like helped with or was in charge of, those are weaker phrases and there's often stronger verbs that you can use instead. Also double check for typos and inconsistent formatting. Here are some tips for you if you are applying to a college versus a scholarship. You might want to adjust your resume accordingly. For instance, let's say that it's a local scholarship specifically for students interested in nursing. And let's say that you have worked at, I'll use one of my former students as an example. She worked with elderly patients. That was part of her job. And she wanted to be a nurse. So she really emphasized that because that was more in line with the scholarship criteria for nursing. So even though she played sports and participated in other activities, when she needed her resume for that particular scholarship, she adjusted things a little bit to highlight the nursing and healthcare aspect. Whereas when she was applying to colleges, her focus was more well-rounded on her academics and her extracurriculars. So just know that you might have multiple versions of your resume depending on what you're using it for. The same thing would go for an internship or a job. You might need to adjust your resume accordingly. So save the original, make a copy, and then adjust it accordingly. It can help if you have a teacher or mentor review your resume just to make sure that there's no typos, to make sure that you are presenting yourself in a way that really showcases who you are. If you're going to ask someone for a letter of recommendation, whether it's a teacher, a guidance counselor, or somebody in the community, if you are emailing them, go ahead and just attach your resume as you ask them if they would be willing to write you that strong letter of recommendation. For me personally, as a teacher, I feel like this kind of cuts out an extra step. You can use your resume to help you brainstorm content for the Common App, not just your activities, but sometimes students like to take different elements of their resume and incorporate it into their personal statement or their supplemental essays potentially. Also, another quick tip for you is make sure that you are saving your PDF with a clear title. So I would put your first name, underscore last name, resume. That way, when you're attaching it, it's very clear what it is. Also, some scholarships are online and they ask you to attach your resume that way. So you want to make sure that it's not just resume as the title. You want to have your name as well. So quick recap, a resume is typically one page. It needs to be very cleanly formatted and organized. That way it's easy to read and understand. You want to use action verbs, numbers, and outcomes to truly showcase your impact. Your resume should reflect you and your strengths. Be sure to proofread it and save the PDF so that it's ready to share. Make sure that it has a clear title, again, with your first and last name. Make sure that it's on your personal email, not just your school email. That way you have access to it in the future or when you're not on your school computer. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share this video with fellow rising seniors. If you are a rising senior who's about to embark on that college application process, best of luck. I do have some other college videos that might be helpful, and I do offer one-on-one tutoring to help students with their personal statements. I'll include the info for that in the description box below in case you're curious. Until next time, happy writing!